Right, question 85. So we're going to play around with this a little because you do need to have, I think I've seen this before, or this idea, this discussion about wanting to make sure you understood what's going on. And I will try and use some of it. Some of these could be quite straightforward, but I'll try and use some numbers. I always think go for the numbers if you need to help you put it into play. Right, so let's begin. So here it says here that potentially, so we're talking about inventory valuation here. So I had to really put some numbers into play to sort of do some of these. So it says, what situation could we see potentially out of date valuation on issues? So what we're sending out. So what they're really saying here is this. Imagine Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So you buy something on Monday, maybe say for £50, and the price goes up on Tuesday. So you buy some more on Tuesday and it's now 60 and the price keeps going up on 70. Now, here's the thing. If you're using a first in, first out method, the value is actually 70 by Wednesday. But when you push it out to sell it, you're recognizing it at 50. So like your cost is saying 50 when you actually push it out to sell it. So it's possible that you are more likely to see, I think this could have been qualified by saying it could have when prices are changing, I think, to help you understand that, because really we want to put inventory out there. We want inventory to be out there at the fair value cost of what it should be, as opposed to this much lower cost that you have. This might be purely due to inflation, but the point remains that this valuation is out of date. The real valuation is closer to 70 by Wednesday when you choose to sell it. So you're buying in first in, first out, Monday, Tuesday, as opposed to if you're using a more average method, and if you added all these together, 50 plus 60 is 110, 110 plus 70 is 180, and the average is 60. And so the AVCO method takes you to a closer valuation to what's there. So the answer here is FIFO, right? Because FIFO has a more out of date, because you're going with the 50 as opposed to something which have been a bit more average at 60. Here we are. The valuation of inventory rarely reflects the actual purchase price. So that must be AVCO, because AVCO is taking an average, which is not really a reflection of what the actual is what it is, which is more FIFO, right? And it says here, this inventory valuation is more suited to oil. Yes, of course, because oil is the kind of product that you're mixing. And so think of AVCO as sand and oil, things are mixing and you're mixing them together. You almost are probably, you have to use AVCO unless you're having several tanks for every single receipt of oil, which doesn't make sense. So AVCO will make more sense there. This is sort of saying, listen, for short shelf lives, it makes sense to use a FIFO method because you don't want it to go bad. So the first bit to come in, right? In times of rising prices, this will give, what method will give higher profits? Well, so what we're saying here is that, using this example again, if we're using the FIFO method, what we're saying is that your closing inventory by the time you get here is 70. Now, if you think about it, if your closing inventory is high, right, due to inflation, well, if your closing inventory is high, your cost of sales is low, because your opening inventory plus your purchases, whatever they are, they're what they are. But it's all about the valuation of closing inventory, you see, because the higher closing inventory is, the lower cost of sales is. The lower cost of sales is sales minus cost of sales, which gives us gross profit. If you reduce cost of sales, your gross profit goes up, right? So in rising prices, it means your closing inventory, in effect, which is what they're really asking you to talk about, closing inventory. If closing inventory is higher, therefore, cost of sales will be lower, because this is purely due to inflation. And if cost of sales is lower, gross profit is higher. So your FIFO method does that, yeah, so there you are. That's your situation. Now, what they're really saying is that, compared really to this one, in times of rising prices, this gives lower profits is because you're using a different method where you're averaging out these costs. If you average this out, your cost of sales technically falls in value. Sorry, your closing inventory, your valuation of closing inventory will fall, because as opposed to the FIFO method, which will value closing inventory at 70 or even 80, let's make this 80, AVCO will bring this figure down. AVCO will bring the closing inventory figure down because it's adding it all together with the lower initial figures. And that fall in closing inventory will mean that cost of sales is higher. And if cost of sales is higher, profits are lower. So the answer here is AVCO. It's really a switch between this and this. Here we are. Inventory is valued as an average. That's very much what we're talking about. And inventory is valued at the most recent purchase cost. So closing inventory, this is closing inventory they're talking about. Closing inventory is valued at what the most, first in, first out. So what we've recently bought is what's in closing inventory. And that's FIFO, right? So a bit of a thinking question, but I think it's one that you have time to spend time thinking about, right? And to get comfortable with. Okay, great stuff. That's 85.